Hey everyone, and welcome back to another installment on this engine teardown marathon series. We've still got several engines to go. We're going as fast as we possibly can. Of course, I don't like to tear engines down until we start getting a bulk of parts in. So this engine belongs to Bill out of Kentucky, and it's an 88 cubic inch twin cam, of course, and it came out of his 2004 Trike model. So this particular build is going to be an interesting one. So stick around. As I said, we've been waiting on parts for Bill's build for quite some time now, waiting as long as we really needed to before we tore it down. I don't like to have a bunch of engines tore down until we have parts ready to start putting things back together. It just makes it easier to track your workload, keep up with everything, things like that. So again, this is a 2004 twin cam for Bill out of Kentucky, coming out of a Trike. We will be doing a 117 on this one, but set up specifically for high mileage Trike and touring all over the US and Canada, so he can ride this thing absolutely anywhere. So you guys know the drill. Let's get started. Now, I can tell already, one of Bill's biggest complaints was heat. Tremendous amount of heat off this engine. Remember, this is a Trike, guys. Special consideration should be taken for heavier motorcycles. Right off the bat, I can smell it. Just removing the rocker box, there's a very, very heavy burnt oil smell coming out of it. And I'll show you in more detail. You can actually see how the rocker support, and you'll see in a minute how the rocker base actually turned gold from the excessive heat. This thing was getting hot. We can also see quite a bit of carbon buildup in there in the ports, again from heat. I don't see any oil, however, but yeah, she definitely got pretty hot. Now let's take a look. As I said a second ago, you can see the gold color here. This thing, and it's not oil stained. We can see that. This thing got incredibly hot. We can also see the gold discoloration on the rockers here. Again, this is not oil stain. It's not wiping off. Now let's look inside the breathers. And again, you can, whew, man, oil got pretty hot. These are not original gaskets or the original breathers that would have been in place in 2004. This is a later model design. It's a stamped steel instead of a cast aluminum. So someone has been in here before, no doubt. But the crank breathers themselves are relatively clean. Check this one as well. Again, you can see this being the front, it's not quite as gold as the rear, but still pretty gold. Yeah, someone's been in here to update the crank breathers, no doubt. And the breather gaskets, I'll go ahead and show you that. You can see they're not overly saturated, so that's actually a good sign. Now let's take a look at the spark plugs. Overall, their condition is fairly good. The only issue is you can tell this thing was running quite a bit rich. I don't see any deposits, you know, those white crystallines that we mentioned in our how to read a spark plug video. You don't see those white crystals on the ground electrode or on the center electrode, so there's probably not a lot of oil infiltration from above the piston. The dark color, yes, definitely he's running quite a bit rich. I don't see the center porcelain doesn't look melted or anything, but it's pretty hard to identify that because they are carboned up quite a bit. So let's keep going. You can smell the burnt oil. Now the carbon in the head is actually fantastic. I want to show you guys give you an idea of what I would call normal, right? And what would be acceptable. So let's take a close look there. See, we see a light carbon dusting around here, and you know, you'll have a little bit lighter exhaust valve, about that color, a tan color, and just basically a dusting throughout the chamber. Not a lot built up on this quench shelf here. This is a healthy looking combustion chamber for a high mileage engine. Okay. All right, now let's take a look at the rear head here. We see basically the exact same, other than it running a bit rich, and maybe a little bit of excessive oil in the cylinders. They just, again, have a light carbon dusting. This is completely normal and not at all that bad. Whew. Again, you can smell the burnt oil. Okay, now we can we can see a little more telltale sign in the cylinder. Now there's no question there are some areas. Now I'll give you a little bit of an interesting tech deal here. When you look inside the cylinders, I'm hoping you can see it on the camera. In line with the cylinder studs, you may be able to see a frosted area that runs here in line with the studs. You may be able to see that line there on the bottom here. We flip it around, you'll notice there's another line that runs down the length of the cylinder there. You don't see it as much here or as much there. Now, there's multiple causes for that, but overall the cylinder doesn't really look too bad. It's still got a good crosshatch. You can tell it does have some miles on it, but let's pull the second one, have a look. All right, we see the exact same thing in this one. All right, you can see it starts about right here. There's a line in line with the studs. Not so bad there. A little bit more there and all the way down the cylinder. Then there's another one here. Now this can come from a couple of different things. I don't recall the exact history on this engine, but sometimes if the top or the deck of the cylinder itself isn't absolutely perfectly perpendicular with the bottom. In other words, when it's torqued down in the case here and to the head, if it's not absolutely perfectly flat, when you torque the cylinder down, the cylinder can twist a little bit when it's put into place. And it doesn't take much. Remember, on these stock forged pistons, the clearance is only about 1.5 thousandths. So it doesn't take very much flex for things to move. And that can create those spots. And another, if they aren't, again, completely flat, when you torque it down, there can be high and low spots that can create tight spots right around the cylinder studs. It's not heavily uncommon. So anytime cylinders are bored and honed, it's always a good idea to check that on a surface plate on the top and base of the cylinder. Make sure they're absolutely perfect. But overall, it's really not in terrible shape. Now, when we look at the top of the pistons, the rings look pretty good. The skirts look pretty good. The rings look like he had a good ring seal. Let's pop these pistons off. I'll give you a closer look. Now let's have a look at the pistons. Again, not too terrible, right? We see a little bit of a glaze to this. We know it was running a little bit rich. This isn't sticky or oily, but it's shiny. So we know he was running a little on the rich side. But this, again, for a high mileage application, 40,000 miles or so, this isn't unusual. And it's really not that bad or any cause for concern if you're if it's in that condition there. Now we see on the rear one here, you can tell it's a lot cleaner. Piston also has this gold color. And when I look at the rings, I can see on the perimeter of the rings where there was quite a bit of an uneven sealing on the rings here. And just the overall discoloration here on the bottom of the piston. Now, I did not have the opportunity to do a leak down and cylinder pressure test on this engine before I tore it down, but he had mentioned that, again, heat was an ongoing serious major problem. So there's no question, just looking if this piston was able to burn off all of that carbon, despite its rich fuel mixture, there's no question this one was running quite a bit hot. Okay, now this one tells a bit of a different story. I'm not sure what the cam is going to look like, but again, we're working on this rear cylinder. When I look in the bores, it's quite a bit of scarring in the bores down in there, and we can see the gold color on this rear exhaust tappet, and even the roller has turned gold. So, yes, Bill, this thing was getting pretty hot. All right. We did have a bit of oil come out of the cam chest there, and there is quite a bit of oil in the bottom of the case. Now the mystery is we have to figure out why, right? There's no question it was sumping a little bit. More than likely, you know, he had a bit of, may have had some sumping, and that's what led to the heat issue. That's a big characteristic of one that sumps. The loss of power, which Bill said he experienced, it felt like he dropped an anchor occasionally, and very intermittent fuel economy. So let's stack everything up here. He had an intermittent fuel economy, and then also we see what came out of the cam chest. We see how much oil is in there. But he had the loss of power and then excessive engine heat. Now, if we think of what happens inside these things, when you do have some sumping issues, or oil backing up in there, it's putting the engine under more load. When the engine is put under more load, the fuel injection system will deliver more fuel. That's how it works. It utilizes the manifold pressure sensor to determine engine load, basically. So as it's under more load, it will dump more fuel to it. So that would explain his intermittent fuel economy, because again, sometimes it'd be better, sometimes worse. The sumping could be, you know, up and down like that. Also, the excessive engine heat. That would also explain why the spark plugs look the way that they did. Remember, I'd mentioned that they looked like they were running overly rich. And it could very well be that Bill caught this one at just the right time. So let's go a little bit deeper. Your chain tensioner has a little bit of wear. Obviously you can see someone's been in the cam chest before. It does have a Screaming Eagle cam plate on it with the factory chain drive system on it. Okay, I'm not seeing an excessive amount of run out at the pinion shaft here in the cam plate. You know, we saw some that were pretty extreme on a couple of the engines so far, and this one doesn't appear to be too bad. Take a closer look at the plate and cams here. Cam wear is not terrible. Not anything I'm really surprised at. It's still but you can see again, hang on, spacer out of the way, on the rear cam we can see a gold coloration. Let me wipe some of this oil off so we don't confuse it with that. Yeah, this rear cam lobe and everything back there got pretty hot. Now, we notice on the cam plate here a little bit of uneven wear. Now, if I run my finger across that, I can just barely feel a scratch there. Just barely. And actually, this is not too terrible. This is also what you would expect to see for a high mileage pump. Now, what we're going to do for Bill, of course, I'll talk to him, see what he thinks about this, but I will test and check this cam plate. If it tests and checks out good, then we'll reuse it for the build. No need to buy a new one, because this one really doesn't look too bad in there. And let's take a look at the pump. The georotors look pretty good inside the pump. I don't see any major scarring of any kind in here. There is some wear on the internal. Not ideal, but again, overall not in horrible condition. Wow, it looks like we only have 3,000 run out, which makes sense. The cam plate looks relatively healthy. The oil pump looked relatively healthy. Let's check this one more time. Now, of course, you guys understand what we're checking now is just pinion shaft run out, not total indicated run out. I actually we're going to spin this around, and I'm just going to check on the case on the sprocket shaft side and see what we find. 2, 3, 2. Yep, we have about 3,000 run out. All right, we do have about right at about 10,000 run out over here at the end of the sprocket shaft. Now let's split this case and see what the crank looks like. Yeah, we got quite a bit of oil at the bottom of this thing, but the smell, you can tell this engine was cooking on the inside. Everything in here, the engine case, around the base of the cylinders, all of that has a heavy gold tint to it. The rods have the same, real heavy gold tint to it up here at the top. And it just has that general burnt smell to it. Golly, you can smell it. Just absolutely cooked. Yeah, and we've actually got sludge down here in the bottom. Whew, good grief. All right, guys, there she is split. I have to admit, it's a bit of a mystery. There is no question this engine was getting extremely hot. It did have some excessive oil in the crankcase. We're not done diagnosing this one yet. There is absolutely no question this engine was getting extremely hot. It was not from an excessively lean fuel condition, from what I can see from the spark plugs, but we did get quite a bit of oil out of the bottom end on this one, which does follow one of Bill's complaints. So it's one of those things, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did he start out with a lean fuel mixture, which led to a little bit of blow-by based on the conditions of the cylinders? Again, not terrible, but we can tell he did not have an exceptionally good ring seal there. Did the excessive blow-by create a little bit of a sumping issue there? And then that's what created the excessive heat. If there was oil on top of the piston, it could have looked like not a lean condition on the plug because of a little bit of oil in on top of the cylinder there, but I don't see the deposits on top of the spark plugs, so I'm a bit puzzled. We can see we did get quite a bit of oil out of the bottom end, so we have this entire area here with an oil film on it, and then of course what's drained down into the tray, which is quite a bit. Probably somewhere, you know, oil over a large area can look like a lot more than it really is. We may have gotten somewhere around 8 to 10 ounces out of it, which is definitely more than desirable in a twin cam. So this one's going to be, I'm going to have to dive deeper into this one. The run out on the crank on the pinion shaft side, again, was only about 3 thousandths. When we did our rough measurement on the sprocket shaft side, then we saw we had over 10 thousandths on that side. So to get a total indicated run out, this one will be put in a truing stand, and I'll measure the bearing surfaces here. I also want to test the cam plate and check some internal dimensions on the oil pump. And I'm also going to put the cylinders in torque plates and then measure the cylinders and see how bad out of shape they are from the excessive heat. It could very well have been just a lot of heat, a lot of miles, and you know, again, it being a trike. Trikes can be tough on these things. So our challenge with this build is building him a 117 that will live in that trike, and we already have a plan in place and we know exactly how we're going to do that. So there may very well be a part 2 to this video once I find out exactly why this thing was getting so hot. So guys, once again, thanks for watching. I appreciate all of your comments. I appreciate our channel members. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. We have 3 more engines to do as part of this teardown series. So be sure, if you haven't subscribed, hit that button and then hit the bell. Choose all notifications. That way when we run the next video, you won't miss it. And you won't miss the follow-up to this one. You guys take care of yourselves and each other. Have a good one.